The gavel slammed, a thunderclap splitting the courtroom's suffocating silence, as Judge Harlan Cobb's voice barked, "Order. We're moving this along now." Marcus Tate, standing at the defendant's table, felt the weight of every eye in the room, their gazes like knives carving into his soul. He wasn't just a man on trial, he was a black man in a town where justice often wore a blindfold stained with bias. Marcus, a 42-year-old legal scholar, had spent his life navigating rooms where he was the only one who looked like him. His work as a senior clerk for the Supreme Court was a badge of honor, earned through decades of grit, late nights, and outsmarting those who underestimated him. But here, in this small-town Georgia courtroom, none of that mattered. He was just another name on a docket, another face to be judged not by his merits, but by the color of his skin. The charge? A flimsy accusation of obstructing justice during a routine traffic stop, twisted into a felony by an overzealous deputy with a grudge. Marcus knew the truth, this was retaliation for daring to question the officer's baseless search of his car. Judge Cobb, a man whose reputation for rushing trials was as infamous as his thinly veiled disdain for certain defendants, glared down at Marcus. "Mr. Tate, your attorney's stalling won't help you here," he sneered, his southern drawl thick with condescension. "This court doesn't have time for theatrics." The judge's eyes flicked to the clock, as if Marcus's fate was just another item to cross off his schedule. The room buzzed with murmurs from the gallery locals, mostly white, who'd come to see justice served swiftly. Marcus's lawyer, Sarah Nguyen, a young public defender with fire in her veins, shot to her feet. "Your Honor, with all due respect, the prosecution hasn't provided a shred of evidence beyond the deputy's word. This case reeks of prejudice, and we demand a full discovery process." Her voice trembled with controlled fury, but Cobb waved her off like swatting a fly. "Sit down, Ms. Nguyen. I've heard enough. We're proceeding to sentencing by noon." The injustice burned in Marcus's chest. He'd seen the law's majesty up close, drafting memos for justices who shaped the nation's future. Yet here, in this cramped courtroom, the law felt like a weapon wielded against him. He locked eyes with Sarah, who gave him a subtle nod, "Keep it together." But the weight of the moment was crushing. He thought of his daughter, Lila, waiting at home, her faith in him unshaken. He couldn't let her see him broken. The prosecutor, a slick man named Greg Warner, stood with a smug grin. "Your Honor, the defendant's refusal to comply with lawful orders speaks for itself. We recommend the maximum penalty to send a message." The words, "send a message," hung heavy, a coded phrase Marcus had heard too many times. It wasn't about justice, it was about control, about reminding him of his place. As Warner spoke, Marcus's mind raced. He'd kept his Supreme Court role quiet, not out of shame but because he wanted no special treatment. He believed in the system, flawed as it was, and thought his record would speak for itself. But Cobb's rush to judgment was stripping away any chance for truth. The deputy's testimony, riddled with inconsistencies, had been accepted without question. Marcus's own account, meticulously detailed, was dismissed as defiant. The deck was stacked, and the game was rigged. Sarah leaned close, whispering, "We've got one shot. I'm calling a witness to establish your character." Marcus nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. Who could sway a judge so eager to convict? Sarah called Dr. Evelyn Carter, a retired law professor who'd mentored Marcus at Yale. Evelyn, a formidable black woman with silver hair and a voice that commanded respect, took the stand. "Marcus Tate is not just a brilliant mind," she said, her tone steady but piercing. "He's a man of integrity who's served the highest court in this land with distinction." A ripple of surprise ran through the gallery. Cobb's brow furrowed, but he quickly masked it with a scoff. "Irrelevant," he snapped. "This isn't a job interview. Stick to the case." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, but she pressed on. "If this court values justice, it will consider the man before it, not the caricature painted by a biased system." Her words landed like a gauntlet, and for a moment, even Cobb seemed rattled. But the judge recovered quickly, banging his gavel. Enough. We're moving to closing arguments. Marcus's heart sank. The trial, barely 2 hours long, was a Shama conveyor belt to conviction. Sarah's face was pale, her hands trembling as she gathered her notes. She'd fought hard, but the system was suffocating her efforts. Marcus caught her eye and mouthed, "Thank you." She didn't smile, but her nod was fierce, a promise to keep fighting. As Warner launched into a closing argument laced with dog-whistle phrases, disrespect for authority, patterns of behavior, Marcus felt the walls closing in. He thought of his mother, who'd marched in Selma, telling him, "They'll try to break you, but you stand tall." He straightened his shoulders, refusing to let Cobb see him falter. But inside, fear clawed at him, not for himself, but for Lila, for the world she'd inherit if men like Cobb held sway. Then, a commotion at the back of the courtroom. The doors swung open, and a woman in a sharp blazer strode in, her presence commanding silence. It was Justice Elena Rivera, a Supreme Court justice known for her razor-sharp intellect and unyielding commitment to fairness. Marcus's breath caught. He'd worked under her for years, but what was she doing here? "Your Honor," Rivera said, her voice calm but cutting through the room like a blade. "I request a recess to address a matter of grave concern." Cobb's face reddened, his authority challenged in his own domain. "This is my courtroom, ma'am," he sputtered. "Identify yourself." "I am Justice Elena Rivera of the United States Supreme Court," she replied, her tone leaving no room for debate. "And the defendant, Marcus Tate, is one of my most trusted clerks. I'm here to ensure this trial does not make a mockery of justice." Gasps erupted from the gallery. Cobb's gavel froze mid-air, his eyes wide with shock. For the first time, Marcus saw uncertainty flicker across the judge's face. Rivera's entrance was a lifeline, but Marcus knew it wasn't the end. Cobb's prejudice ran deep, and a single intervention, even from a Supreme Court justice, might not unravel the tangle of bias that had brought him here. Sarah seized the moment, rising again. "Your Honor, in light of this, we move for a mistrial. The defendant's character and the irregularities in this process demand it." Cobb's jaw tightened, his pride warring with the weight of Rivera's presence. "This changes nothing," he growled, but his voice lacked its earlier venom. The gallery was alive now, whispers turning to murmurs of outrage and disbelief. Marcus felt a spark of hope, but he tempered it. He'd seen the system bend before, only to snap back harder. Rivera stepped closer to the bench, her gaze locked on Cobb. "Your Honor, rushing a trial without due process undermines the very law you claim to uphold. Marcus Tate is not just a defendant, he is a man who has dedicated his life to justice. You will give him the fairness he deserves, or this court will answer for it." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling like dust after a storm. Marcus's heart pounded, not with fear now, but with a fierce resolve. He thought of Lila again, her bright eyes and unwavering belief in him. This wasn't just his fight, it was for her, for every person who'd been judged before they could speak. Cobb leaned back, his face a mask of barely contained fury. "We'll recess for 1 hour, he snapped, banging the gavel. As the courtroom emptied, Marcus caught Rivera's eye. She gave him a small, steady nod, a reminder that he wasn't alone. Sarah gripped his arm, her voice low. "We're not done yet, Marcus. We're going to win this." For the first time that day, Marcus allowed himself to believe her. But he knew the battle was far from over. Cobb's prejudice was a symptom of a deeper sickness, one that wouldn't vanish with a single recess. As he sat in the holding area, waiting for the trial to resume, he thought of the handwritten sign in the courtroom, "Justice tested in shadows." The shadows were real, but so was his resolve to step into the light. The recess stretched longer than an hour, whispers of Rivera's intervention spreading like wildfire. When the trial resumed, Cobb's demeanor had shifted, still gruff, but cautious. Rivera sat in the gallery now, her presence a silent rebuke. Sarah called more witnesses, each one painting a picture of Marcus's character, colleagues from the Supreme Court, community leaders, even the deputy's own supervisor, who admitted the traffic stop was overzealous. Warner's confidence faltered, his arguments growing thinner. The gallery, once hostile, began to shift, some faces softening with doubt. Marcus felt the tide turning, but he remained guarded. He'd seen hope snatched away before. Sarah's closing argument was a masterstroke, weaving Marcus's life story into a broader tapestry of systemic injustice. "This isn't just about Marcus Tate," she said, her voice rising. "It's about whether this court will uphold the principles it claims to serve or let prejudice win." The room was electric, every word a spark. Cobb's face was unreadable as he prepared to rule. Marcus braced himself, knowing that even with Rivera's intervention, the judge's bias might prevail. But something had changed in the courtroom, a crack in the armor of injustice, letting light seep through. Judge Harlan Cobb's gavel hovered, his eyes darting between Marcus Tate, Justice Elena Rivera, and the restless gallery. The courtroom, once a stage for his unchecked authority, now felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with anticipation. Marcus stood tall, his hands steady despite the storm raging inside him. He'd spent his career analyzing the law's intricacies, but this moment wasn't about legal briefs or precedents, it was about whether truth could pierce the veil of prejudice. Cobb cleared his throat, his voice strained. "This court has heard the arguments and the unexpected testimony." His glance at Rivera was sharp, but her unflinching stare held him in check. "I'm not convinced the prosecution has met its burden of proof. The charge of obstructing justice is dismissed." A collective gasp swept through the room, followed by a murmur that grew into a roar. Marcus exhaled, his knees nearly buckling, but he held his ground. Sarah Nguyen's face lit up, her fist clenched in quiet triumph. But Cobb wasn't done. However, he continued, his tone hardening, "This does not absolve the defendant of his conduct during the stop. Let this be a lesson to respect authority." The words dripped with venom, a final jab to save face. Marcus felt the sting but refused to flinch. He'd won this round, but Cobb's parting shot was a reminder, the system's biases didn't vanish with a single ruling. Justice Rivera rose from the gallery, her presence commanding silence. "Your Honor, your ruling is noted, but the process here raises serious questions about impartiality. I'll be filing a formal review with the State Judicial Board." Cobb's face paled, his gavel trembling in his hand. The threat of oversight from a Supreme Court justice was no small matter, and the gallery buzzed with whispers of accountability. As the courtroom emptied, Marcus felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Sarah, her eyes bright with relief but shadowed with fatigue. "We did it, Marcus. You're free." He nodded, his throat tight. "Not just me," he said softly. "This is for everyone who doesn't have a Justice Rivera walking through the door." Sarah's smile was bittersweet. She knew the truth as well as he did, today's victory was a drop in an ocean of injustice. Outside the courthouse, the Georgia sun beat down, its heat a stark contrast to the chill of the courtroom. A small crowd had gathered, reporters, locals, and a few activists who'd caught wind of the trial's drama. Marcus spotted Lila, his 16-year-old daughter, running toward him. She threw her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. "I knew you'd come home, Dad," she whispered. He held her close, his heart swelling with love and guilt. He'd shielded her from much of the world's ugliness, but today, she'd seen it up close. Justice Rivera approached, her expression soft but resolute. "Marcus, I'm proud of you. You didn't just fight for yourself, you exposed a flaw in the system." He shook his head, humbled. "I didn't expect you here, Justice." "Why?" Rivera's eyes softened. "Because you're one of the best we have. And because I've seen too many good people crushed by men like Cobb. This ends now." The reporters swarmed, microphones thrusting forward. "Mr. Tate, what's your message to others facing biased trials?" one asked. Marcus took a deep breath, Lila's hand in his. "Keep fighting," he said, his voice steady but laced with emotion. The law is only as just as the people who wield it. Hold them accountable. The cameras flashed, capturing a moment that would ripple far beyond this small town. In the days that followed, the story exploded. News outlets ran headlines about the Supreme Court clerk wrongfully tried and Judge Cobb's rushed trial under fire. Social media buzzed with outrage, some calling Cobb a relic of a bygone era, others defending him as a tough but fair jurist. The handwritten sign in the courtroom, "Justice tested in shadows," became a viral image, a symbol of the fight for fairness. Activists organized rallies outside the courthouse, demanding Cobb's resignation, while others in the community doubled down, claiming the trial was blown out of proportion. Marcus returned to Washington, D.C., but the weight of the trial lingered. At the Supreme Court, colleagues greeted him with quiet respect, some sharing their own stories of prejudice. He resumed his work, drafting memos and analyzing cases, but his perspective had shifted. The law's majesty was real, but so were its cracks he'd now seen up close and felt in his bones. Sarah, meanwhile, became a local hero. She took on more cases, each one a battle against the same systemic biases that had targeted Marcus. She and Marcus stayed in touch, their bond forged in the crucible of the courtroom. Lila, inspired by her father's resilience, started a blog about justice and equality, her young voice reaching thousands online. Marcus read every post, his pride tempered by the knowledge that she was growing up in a world still wrestling with its demons. Judge Cobb faced mounting scrutiny. The judicial board's review was thorough, uncovering a pattern of rushed trials and disproportionate sentencing, particularly for black defendants. Cobb retired quietly 6 months later, his legacy tarnished but his defenders still vocal. Marcus didn't gloat, he knew one judge's fall wouldn't dismantle the system. But it was a start. One evening, Marcus sat with Lila on their porch, the D.C. skyline glowing in the distance. She leaned against him, her voice soft. "Dad, do you think things will ever change?" He looked at her, his heart aching with love and resolve. "They will, Lila. Not easily, not quickly, but they will. Because people like you keep asking the question." The trial had been a crucible, forging Marcus into something stronger, but it had also left scars. He thought of the gallery, split between those who saw him as a threat and those who saw the truth. He thought of Cobb, a man blinded by his own power, and Rivera, a beacon of what the law could be. The fight wasn't over, it never would be, but Marcus knew his place in it. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the porch, Marcus felt a quiet peace. He'd faced the system's worst and come out standing. He'd shown Lila that justice, though flawed, could be fought for. And he'd reminded himself why he'd chosen this path, not just to serve the law, but to make it better. The story of Marcus Tate's trial spread far beyond Georgia, sparking debates in living rooms, classrooms, and courtrooms. It challenged people to ask, what is justice when prejudice holds the gavel? Share your thoughts. Where do you stand on right, wrong, and the fight for a fairer world?